Hello, my name is Nikki T.
My name is Kurt Ozon.
And today we have a very special group of guests.
Matt and Seth.
Matt and Seth. Why don't you tell us your last names? Matt Maxwell.
Yep.
Seth Costner. Damn, I got him right.
Yeah, you did great.
Nice.
Yeah. One of the things I'm like always worried about when I'm emceeing at events is, am I going to get the last names right?
I was talking to Goldie this morning, and he was like, yeah, I did a radio phoner this morning, and you know it's going to be a good one when they go, okay, before we start, how do we pronounce your name?
Yeah.
Brutal, dude. The worst.
Yeah. I mean, the radio folks, when they gave me a radio show, they're like, we're going to give you a radio show because you're a guy that shouldn't have a radio show. Here's your radio show.
Fixed it.
Yeah, it's the best. Well, thank you guys for being our guest today.
Honored. Thank
Yeah.
y'all for having us.
In this luxurious studio that we just made from Brett telling us how to do it.
From the ground up. Like
Yeah.
Andre.
Looks great, guys. For real.
Yeah.
So, why are you guys here?
Ta-da.
Go ahead.
Well, it all started when Seth and I became friends.
Okay.
What year?
It's been about 8 years, huh?
Yeah, about 8 years we've known each other now, I think. So
Yeah, man. It was my first touring gig. We met, became friends quickly, started playing together.
Who are y'all touring with?
We were with the Swan Brothers at the time. Yep.
Those are good boys.
Good Oklahoma boys, and that's partly why they called me. I had played with the drummer. And he said, hey, I know this guy. And they go, oh, he's from Oklahoma. That would be a great fit, personality-wise, whatever. Went out there with them, met Seth. Time goes on. Seth had been in Nashville a long time. I don't want to speak for you, right?
yeah. I
Seth was
moved
like
here-
my first friend that had a blue check mark on the internet.
Yeah, I think I moved here in 2003, so I've been here.
Nice.
Been here a good while.
Kurt, are you going to make the move? Or are you going to?
I think no. Now it's not cool to have a blue check mark.
I know,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I'm trying to get mine removed. man.
Everybody just thinks you paid for it now.
I think you just tie some floss around it and pull it tight, and then like 2 weeks, like the blood dies to it, and then you're a regular person again.
Man, that brings back memories from Tishomingo when they would do the ag stuff that they do.
Oh,
yeah.
I'd never been around that.
Removing testicles.
Right, exactly.
Bro. Ugh.
That was one of my first like agriculture class experiences. I come from Amarillo, Texas, moved to Tishomingo, Oklahoma, and it was big time culture shock for me. I'd only been around dogs and cats.
Yeah.
I knew what a cow was, but I didn't know what they did to it.
Been eating them, but
Been eating the shit out of them.
I don't even know what that is. I'm gonna have to Google that later.
well, go ahead and explain, Matt, please.
Well, okay, so moved to Tishomingo, ag class. We're going on a field trip. I'm like, this is awesome. I love this class. And then there's a group of kids, and I can't really see what's going on, but I knew they had said the word castration, and I knew what that meant. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I really want to like watch it necessarily. So I'm kind of in the back of the group, the crowd. I can't really see, and I hear, wee! And I was like,
No, make the real noise.
yeah, very much louder.
You definitely redline there.
Sorry if you have AirPods in. Or whatever.
Yeah, and so that was it. R.I.P. to the whatever's nuts.
Ouchie.
Yeah.
I when I was playing with Michael Ray, we do fairs and festivals and stuff. And this is when I guess people still use Snapchat. I think I don't have it, but
Yeah,
when,
people
like,
do.
Before Instagram stories, like posting on Snapchat was like your kind of cool way to be with your fans, whatever. And Michael was like, "Hey, will you eat these Rocky Mountain oysters for my Snapchat story?" And I was like, "That's disgusting," but yeah, I'll do it.
This is pre-vegan.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
oh, definitely.
I was like, I didn't know if they didn't tell
eating
you.
bull testicles. Yeah, definitely not vegan for sure.
How were they? Were they good?
Disgusting. And I'm the least picky eater in the world. Like I've eaten all different kinds of animals and livers and brain and all this kind of stuff.
Hell yeah.
And I did not. And like that's the only reason I can eat vegan is because I just think everything tastes great. But this was disgusting. And you bit into it. It was like orange on the inside.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Anyway. So let's just go back a little bit. So you guys are friends, and you guys wrote a book together.
Yeah,
True?
We started castrating hogs about 5 years ago. Yeah, go ahead, man. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So we had known each other for a few years, and Matt kind of came to me with the idea. I got to give him credit, man. It was a great idea. It was like he kind of came to me, and he was like, "Man, I think it would be cool if we just kind of put some of the stuff we've learned into a book, stuff that maybe we wish we had known, or stuff maybe we've observed that, like, hey, that's not the way to do that, And I was like, yeah, I'm totally down. So we started working on it. I want to say it's a labor of love, man. It's been going on since, I think the idea probably came in 2019.
Yeah.
18, 19.
Yep.
And then, COVID hit, and we kind of put it on pause for a while because it's like this is not the time to release a book about going on the road and touring, and playing music. So
Here's how you apply for unemployment.
right.
Yeah.
But we stayed semi-consistent throughout the last few years, and we would get together. I mean, obviously with our touring schedules and
Two
stuff,
different touring schedules.
Yeah, there were times where it was kind of hard to pin down a time to get together and work on it. But
We were doing it remotely. I remember one time I was playing with Lauren Elena, and we were in an arena, and we had met up virtually, and we were working. I was sitting somewhere in one of the hallways with my laptop.
like
working
gotta go
on
and sound check.
Yeah.
But we always stuck with it, man, and it's finally done. So
Yeah,
we're
partly
super-
inspired by like our mistakes, mistakes we'd see from others. That's a big one. It's like, oh yeah, I really fucked that up. Let me not do that again.
Do you guys feel morally superior to most people now that you've written a book? I know I would.
Not at all. Actually, I feel like I need to reread the book and figure stuff.
Sometimes I talk about teaching things actually makes me learn them better.
100%.
So I always, because you think about different angles of things, and you think about it at like a higher level view almost.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yep.
So oftentimes when I'm trying to teach someone something else, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And you only have so much time to give them that information.
Yeah.
It's like you sit and stew with your own thing, and you learn things at your own pace. But now that you have someone else's attention, how long you got it? You better get them, distill it down so they can digest it in a short time.
Yeah.
There's definitely an art to teaching pedagogy for sure.
For sure.
I'm excited to have this book out in the world, and I hope it helps some people.
Yeah. So like for people that aren't aware, of course it's called Hired Musician. Ta-da, look at this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tico.
Tico.
He did our cover.
Oh, that's awesome.
A good Oklahoma boy. There you go.
Yeah.
This is not the book, obviously. It would be very short, but this is the cover.
And you talked about like how you guys kind of got there, but like what are some of the things that you guys talk about in the book that you get to dig deep into?
What's the point of this book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the subtitle is A Guide to Getting and Keeping Gigs. Literally just that. I mean, in there we say between Seth and I, and we've spent so many hours together as friends, but also working on the book and going like, okay, what all gigs have we done? I mean, shoe department gigs, that was Seth's first gig.
Yep.
And then, we played MSG a couple years ago. I mean, those are two very different types of gigs and everywhere in between. And through that, it's like, okay, that was good, that was bad, this was good. I saw this guy or girl do that. I did this. And the book kind of definitely didn't write itself, but it let us know kind of like I don't write songs, but I hear songwriters kind of say that. You just tap into this river of ideas and just follow it. And I feel like that's what the book did. And it kind of started progressing. It's like we started with getting gigs, and then chapter 2 is keeping gigs, and then it's like, well, we got to talk about money, obviously, because that's a big part of why any of us are, doing a lot of this stuff, outside of the other reasons. But and then it kind of evolved, and the last chapter is musings, and we get kind of abstract into that. So
yeah, we definitely, there's a variety of topics and subjects. It's not just how do you get a gig? How do you keep a gig? I mean, we kind of go down the rabbit hole in the final chapter about stuff that, when I first started playing music, the thought of post-gig depression never crossed my mind, you know, or like, and so there's some interesting topics we get into, like, hey, you've just come off this huge tour, you're screaming fans every night, whatever, and you're home alone, and it's like, oh, okay, like how do you healthily replace that touring high? You know, because it can be kind of jarring if you're on the road and you're in that mode, and then you come home and it's very different.
You got fired. You quit a gig.
Sure.
I mean, we go down the list of a lot of different scenarios that it's like, I remember how that felt, and that was tough.
Yeah.
And
so what did we do to, to feel better about that?
To get your brain right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because a lot of that's mental, I assume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, just to kind of brag on y'all and just kind of mention some of your qualifications. Matt and I, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but Matt plays bass for Luke Combs, and we tour together, and we're best friends. And Seth plays for Chris Young, and has toured with Luke Combs as well. Yeah. So you guys have done all kinds of crazy. I know, Matt, some of the stories that you've told me just of your life.
Oklahoma's an interesting place.
You guys have been through it all, it seems like. Yeah. So it's cool that you guys are putting all this experience in book form, because like we're talking about like mistakes we've made and all this different kind of stuff like that. When I was driving over here, I was thinking over some of my mistakes that I've made touring, and I could definitely write a book just on mistakes, I'm sure, musically and otherwise.
None of mine involve alcohol. None of them.
No, of course not.
I think all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, talked about that on another pod. I'm like, I think the 10 worst moments of my life were all alcohol. Yeah,
Same.
You'll have that on this big job, so
For sure. And, you know, we tip our hats to that. You know, and a lot of this is like tidbits. Seth had the great idea of, he was like, man, have you ever read The War of Art, The Art of War? One of the two, and another kind of loosely related. We kind of wanted like little short vignettes, like little short principles, move on to the next one. You know, distill it down, get the core idea, move on to the next. Yep. But we cover, you know, a lot of that stuff, you know, just like depression, etc.
Well, I've got the I almost said set list. The
table of contents.
Table of contents here on my phone.
We do have an encore on there, so I could see where you would.
Yeah. Maybe we go through, and since there's only 7 kind of sections, maybe we go through and give us a little nugget from each, if that sounds doable for y'all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So first is getting gigs.
Yeah. You got to get them.
Okay.
I think the very first one, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I had people hit me up all the time asking me questions.
Right.
And my buddy Christian called me the other day, and he's like, you know, we went to Berkeley together. The guy's a monster player. Like, he can just play just about anything. But he's living in Syracuse, and he's not doing what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, what's it like? Like, what do I do in Nashville? How do I get work and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
So I think that this book is built for people like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
People that are wanting to do maybe what we're doing, people that are, you know, on that path or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's really like the band guy's manual, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and that's part of the reason behind the silhouetted musicians. It's like you know, you fill in your mind like that would be me, so it could be anyone kind of idea. Yeah. But
sense.
Specifically the people behind the artist or whoever's hiring you. And that's the prelude, the very beginning section is like, this book is for those people that want to play stages and whatever, but also play at their local bar. It's just like, hey, wherever you are, it will help you get further along based on our crap and things that we've seen.
Yeah. And speaking of chapter 1, I mean, I think, like Matt said, we have a lot of different tidbits in each chapter, but I think the first thing we say in chapter 1 is show up.
Hone your craft.
Hone your craft, and then show up. You know, you got to show up prepared. And I mean, for me, that's half the battle. Just showing up.
I've seen people not do it. And we even say that it's like, it sounds funny to say this, but I have literally been on a gig, and I don't know if we say this specifically, but it came from a story. I remember we had a gig in Dallas, and
I can see your wheels spinning.
the wheels are
Should I
spinning.
tell this?
I think I can.
Yeah.
So it was with Corey Kent.
Yeah.
And
We love Corey.
we had a drummer, me too, man. And I've played with him off and on for 15 years. A dear friend of mine, man. And we've had some real deep, cool moments. And anyways, we're on this gig, and I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story. This was before any of his current band, and this was many years ago. We had this gig in Dallas, and it was this really cool private party in the Dallas area. And the drummer just had, I can't remember, something coming up. Something came up according to him, and we're all kind of looking at each other like, is this about to happen? Like, is this drummer just like... And he just didn't show up. And I don't think it was like a legit, you know what I mean? It's not like, hey, my leg got cut off. It's like not feeling well kind of thing. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, whoever that person was. Maybe it was, but that's not the only anecdotal. I've seen that happen where people just don't show up and you're like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And showing up on time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things too, like we just started booking live full band stuff, and it just, when an artist is playing by themselves, they're reliant on themselves. Right. That's easier. When you have 5 guys or 6 guys or 7 guys, and every person has their part they have to put in. If one of those people don't show up, that's a big problem.
Yes.
You know? Dang. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, I totally get that. It makes sense even for me not being like a band guy. you know, like, that's the benchmark. That's like the door. If you don't do that, you're not even in the door.
They didn't put the scaffolding up. How are we going to put the electrical wires in my house?
Yeah. And it's something, again, like, I think that's cool to clarify because you don't even think about that until it happens. Right.
And not to backtrack, that specific story, there may have been a legit reason.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of like 10 other times that has happened.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, it's
that
not
will
as
get you
uncommon
never
as
hired
you would
again.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
it happens for sure.
Yep.
Well, since we're talking about getting gigs, will you guys share the story of how you got like your first like big cool gig?
Love it.
Yeah, I think for me, so as far as my first touring gig in Nashville, I came to Nashville in 2003, went to college here, and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do with music. I just knew I wanted to do something in music. I didn't know if that was going to be singer-songwriter, because I write and play, but I just knew I wanted to make a living doing that, And so I remember I moved to LA for a while and kind of bounced back and forth, and basically kind of a light bulb went off when I realized like you can actually make money as a sideman. Like that's actually one of the most lucrative ways to get out and make a living, like if you're trying to figure out what you want to do. And I ended up joining a cover band, and I played with them for probably 2 or 3 years and kind of honed my craft, which is what we're talking about in chapter 1. And the first gig I ever got that was like, oh, this is really cool, like I'm out on the road, was I think with Lauren Elena. And one of the guys that was in the cover band was actually, because I was singing in that band, he was playing keys. He was going on to another gig, and he called me, and he was like, hey, I heard you're kind of interested in getting on the road and trying this thing out. And I was like, yeah, man, I've been wanting to do that for a while. And so he's like, hey, the gig's yours. Like they've already, placed their trust in my recommendation. And so I went home and just like woodshed for days on that. And the funny thing is, I really came from more of a guitar playing background. Like that's what I'd done my whole life, was play guitar since I was like 14. And that's what I started writing songs on. And I kind of realized diversifying myself and kind of like you do, Kurt, like you play everything. And I realized, man, that's a good way to kind of get your foot in the door. And so they actually called me for keys, which I was a little worried about at first, because I was like, that's not my main, like I'm more of a guitar player. But that was my first taste of like a tour bus and like going out and playing arenas and actually getting out there. So that's kind of how I got started doing that. And then kind of one gig led to another gig, and
So it wasn't like an audition or anything like that. It was just a friend of yours knew that you had honed your craft and put your name in, and you just kind of got the gig.
Yeah, for sure, which we talk about in the book a lot. I think that's why networking is so important, because
Yeah.
you never know who's going to recommend you for a gig. I mean, it could be somebody you least expect. It could be somebody that's doing something else, and then years down the line, they're in another position to invite you on, into the band or into their group. So
It's like 10 or 20 to 1, the gigs that I've gotten with nepotism versus like answering a Craigslist music thing or whatever.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time I like played a gig or played in front of people was in Tishomingo. They had this church thing, and they're like, "We need a bass player," and I was like, "Well, I have a bass, and I've played for a little bit," and I did it, and cannot remember how it goes. Like the whole like I can't remember how that. And that was the first time I'd played in front of people. And then I went to a little junior college that had a music program. Finished that. I moved to the Tulsa, Oklahoma area that has somewhat of a music scene, and did that for a lot of years. And that's where I met Tyler, our band leader, with Luke. And, fast forward, my first touring gig was with the Swan Brothers, like first arena, walking out on the stage, and first time on a bus, real funny moment. We blew a bus tire, and we were running a little bit late. We still made it, but I just remember being like, oh, my God, it was quite an introduction into the touring world. And then from there, I played with Lauren Elena and now Luke, yeah. So
How'd you get hooked up with the Swan Brothers?
the drummer Joe Henderson at the time, who's now living in L.A. That's right, you've met Joe.
Yeah, I love Joe.
Yeah, vocal producer now. And I remember when he was on that gig, sorry, side note, I would watch him in the evenings after we finished a show or whatever, put on his headphones and start mixing, and it was like 11, 12, and I'm like, man, that's hustle, dude. And it really inspired me, and I've taken that with me to this day of like, you know, because I was not living in Nashville, and outside looking in, I was like, okay, these guys are grinding.
Yeah.
And so it really, you know, inspired me in a good way. But yeah, Joe recommended me. I played with Joe on Corey Kent's gig.
Okay.
Yeah, this was in Lawrence, Kansas, I think at the Bottleneck or somewhere like that. And Joe was filling in with Corey. And we went and ate some noodles, and Joe was like, got a good vibe. And they were out on the Brad Paisley tour with the Swan Brothers. Their bass player stepped down, and then Joe threw my name out there, and they're like, Oklahoma guy. And they called me, and I remember getting the call, and they're like, hey, a couple days rehearsal, and then literally the next day we were going out on tour. So it was like boom, boom, boom. It was a lot to process for me. And then, for a lot of years I lived in Oklahoma and commuted back and forth. That was a lot. So I live here now. Been here a couple of years.
Yeah.
Very thankful for that. Hung out with Kurt last night.
Hell yeah. Love it, boys. I know, like, mine was I was giving music lessons to a drummer who was band leader for, what's that guy's name? David Nail. And
here in town.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I was like just teaching him music theory and stuff. And whenever he came over, I would always like have my steel out and my dobro and shit, my banjo. And because like David had that song, Whatever She's Got,
Yeah. Great
and
song.
and I think Jerry Douglas plays on that song. So I'm like, well, they don't have a dobro guy. I'm gonna like put my shit out. So when he comes and sees, he's gonna be like, oh, like if we need a dobro guy, this is the guy. And I teach him scales, and so he can like talk to his bandmates better with harmony and stuff. And then eventually he called me. He's like, "Hey man, are you looking for a road gig?"
Oh,
And I was like, "Oh, sure." He's like, "I know that you play all that stuff, so I gave her your number on my. I thought it was gonna be David Nail, and then someone calls me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to tour with Janet Kramer?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." And I was Googling who is Janet Kramer. You know? Anyway, so that's how I got my first gig.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
I never had a gig, so
All right, so that's getting the gig, I would say, right? Honing the craft.
Fair enough.
One thing I will say is that in Nashville, everyone is very good.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say
Oh,
anyone could, like, there's a million dudes that could play the guitar solo to Beer Never Broke My Heart
Right.
and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So that's just like the first chapter 1, section 1, just be good enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yep.
So now that we've got the gig, let's keep it.
Yes.
What do we do next?
Yeah, and that was part of how the book evolved. It was like, oh, well, this makes perfect sense. Like, you get the gig, you keep it, but then also the book continued with that progression of like more and more deep,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's like exactly, keeping the gig is chapter 2, and it's good.
Yeah, buy
My
it.
brain was blank. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think keeping the gig, we dive into more of the aspects of like when you're there and you're in the moment, like what are some things maybe that you're doing that you don't realize that you're doing that could offend somebody. Even something as funny as like hygiene, man. Because like I think we've all been in close proximity to people, and it's like, man, you got to think about that kind of stuff because that can be offensive. Like just, wash your ass. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah.
Like
Brush your teeth.
brush your teeth,
Yep.
and it's stuff like that that you might not necessarily think, oh, I've got a gig, I've got to make sure that, I wash my clothes and I'm, considerate of other people's space on the tour bus, I'm not throwing my stuff all over the place. 'Cause
Verbally.
Those
Yeah.
because those kind of things can really, grind people's gears after a while. And
Yeah.
that can be, an unfortunate reason why somebody might lose a gig and be unable to keep it is they did something that they didn't even realize was offending other people.
Yeah.
And so we kind of touch on that a little bit and I mean, I've been guilty of that before.
Yeah.
I've been guilty
sure.
of, oh, maybe I should change my socks, like.
Yeah,
or maybe the spiciest level of wings wasn't the right
Yeah,
choice.
maybe that wasn't exactly.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting balance. It's like, okay, all these different personalities, and the bigger the band, the more personalities.
Yeah.
And, we're all out there to have a good time and make money and make the boss or whatever happy. And it's like, oh, okay, I think I'm doing something. And so that self-awareness and reflection, as you
Yeah.
get deeper into the book, is we kind of talk about some of that. And
Yep.
again, we try not to like, neither one of us have a degree in any of this shit.
Right,
you know?
we're not psychologists.
But
Right.
it's just, all of us have experiential, like, okay, I saw that and that wasn't good.
Yeah, and I think self-awareness is one of the most important things you
Yeah.
can have. It's just kind of like take account of what you're doing and like how it's affecting other people.
What
because-
does this gig need from me? Like,
Exactly.
okay, they sent me all these tunes. Am I okay? Or do I need to fucking stay up all night and shed? Which we've
Yeah.
all done. It's like, I have to stay up all night and shed these tunes. Or like, okay, we're jamming, we're improvising. So even musically speaking, just that self-awareness.
for sure?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a million different ways to piss people off and to do a great job. So I think that's cool that you guys are outlining all that.
Thanks,
which
man.
is like, I'm just a million stories are flying in my head right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Any noteworthy you want to share?
What do you mean, like pissing people off and stuff?
I don't know.
Oh,
dude.
for sure.
I just figured there was something fun in there.
Oh, I meant definitely. There's also the thing of like getting like the culture right, because every band has a different culture.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Like the vibe with Luke is, in our thing is different than it would be with some other groups.
Oh, yeah.
And so on every gig, it's like you want to find your place in that culture too.
Yep.
You know, like some places are really strict. You know, it's like hanging out on Josh Turner's band bus is going to be a lot different than like Luke's bus. You know what I mean? So it's like, and also I've, you know, it's funny. It's like when I got the Michael Ray gig, the guy that they had before me did a great job musically, but he just would never hang out with anyone. And he was like, I just don't want to hang out with anyone. I just want to go in my bunk and watch Netflix after the show. And so him and I just traded gigs. Like I left Jana and went and played for Michael, and then we hung out all the time, drank beers and played Can Jam, and you know, we're just bros. And then he went and played for Jana and was just like kind of quiet, chill guy.
Wow.
So it's just like finding the right home too. And if you're coming to a situation on a gig and talking about keeping a gig, it's like you kind of want to fit what they're doing, unless it's like needle drugs. I don't do that, but it's like if people are hanging out, you know, it's like sometimes it's almost like you expected that you like have a beer with them or something.
Yes.
Then it is like not. In some places, you're not allowed to have beer.
Yeah, and we touch on that too. I mean, we talk about how building camaraderie with your bandmates is important. You know, you might not think it is. You might think, oh, it's just my job's to get on stage, play my instrument.
We're all adults. I
We're
can
all
go
adults.
read my book if I want.
And I mean, that's not to say you have to do every single thing that, you know, the other guys are doing, or you have to be, you know, have to conform. But it's just a matter of, you know, getting to know people
and reading the room.
Awareness.
Reading the room.
Yeah.
It goes back to self-awareness for sure.
Yeah.
It's true, man.
Nailed it.
I meant different gigs require different levels of like hanging or whatever.
Yep.
And dude, I mean, I would assume I'm speaking for probably every musician listening to this. You do 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 different gigs. I mean, not just with one art, but like 60 different configurations of bands, whether it's a duo, a trio, artist gig, non-artist gig, whatever, cover gig. And they all have their own, it's like they all have this nucleus, but then the stuff around it, it's like that's the stuff you kind of got to get used to. Show up on time. And that's, you know, again, with the book, it's like show up on time, or some of the first ones in the first chapter. The next one is like self-awareness and growing.
Etiquette.
And so, and each one has its own shit, man.
And with touring, it's like you play, you know, with Luke, we'll play 2 hours a night.
Yeah.
But then the other 22 hours, it's you're still out there. You're still like working, even if you're watching South Park on the bus at 3 a.m. eating Oreos, or if you're in catering or whatever. It's like
watching Jake chug.
Yeah, if you're chugging beers with Jake, it doesn't matter. But it's like what you do then is reflecting of your job performance in a way.
We put that in there. We put if you have to be the guy that chugs the beer, you fucking suck it up and you chug those beers. Love
Chugging beers by Jake.
I kind of like to think of it as like, you know, when you're stepping, whether it's a studio or a tour bus or a plane or whatever, you're kind of clocking in when you step on that bus. You know what I mean? It's not when you step on the stage. And so, I mean, you got to be mindful.
And I don't know about y'all, but it feels like it takes like quite a few years to kind of get comfortable with knowing that in the back of your mind. And then you can be like with me in this gig, it took a while to go like, okay, I know all the tenets that we all know, but then here's some extra stuff. Okay, now I feel like I can be a little closer to me, because at first you're like, let me feel this out a little bit. Read the, you know, like you said, read the room.
Well, every job that you go to, like day job wise, is the same way. It's what's the culture like here?
Yes, culture.
Where can I fit into this culture, right? Because you can't just go in and try to take over. That doesn't work, right? Maybe it does for some people, but often it usually doesn't. Yeah.
It's like you identify the hierarchy and go, okay, this guy's, you know, and this girl's above me and whatever. Okay, here's where I fit in. Bottom bunk, back corner. Get back there, bass player.
Well, it's a funny story. I actually just thought of a example of that when I first, there was a band I was playing in, and there was an older guy in the band that always sat in the same spot on the bus, and it was kind of unspoken, like that was kind of just his spot, you know. He was the oldest guy in the band. He just kind of sat there, and when I first started, I would go sit in that spot, and you know, it's not that huge of a deal, but it's just little things like that can kind of be like, oh, well, this kind of been his spot for the last 10 years, you know what I mean? And now you're just coming in here and flopping down, and like that's kind of like that self-awareness thing that you kind of have to learn that as you go.
Yeah.
You know?
Watch where you flop, y'all.
Just watch where you flop.
That should be a chapter.
Yeah.
You were laughing earlier, and I really want to know, is it, can you remember? Okay.
I don't remember what we were talking about. My brain's, I'm already thinking about chapter 3, so.
Bring it, baby.
I forgot what it was, though. I got to look it up
Music.
again.
Music, and
I love that.
yeah, I mean, it's a book about getting gigs. We got to talk about music a little. It's not a music educational book. You know what I mean? It's not. We're not trying to educate people on how to play, but we do point them in the right direction. We have a reference list or a resource list at the end of the book.
Go see Kurt. He went to
Go
Berkeley.
see Kurt.
He's a genius.
Yeah, if you want to
Check.
know how to play every instrument known to man.
Yeah,
go see
for
Kurt.
sure.
I would just like to point out that before I came here, I just left my fiddle lesson today, and it's like I've been playing for a year or so or whatever, and I'm in this lesson going like playing scales with like the bright bow technique. It's nothing. I'm not playing anything fancy or whatever. But I appreciate the kind words.
Hey, man, respect, dude.
I heard a story about that, actually, by the way, that you pretty much just woke up one day and you're like, oh, this song needs fiddle. I'm going to learn how to play fiddle. Is that kind of how that went?
No, it was October of 2022, and Luke was showing us the new record. And it was like, oh, cool, that song's great. This is great. Oh, Fast Car, that's cool. And then I heard Love You Anyway. It was just this super quiet song with all this fiddle in it. And I looked around, like my eyes bugged out in my head. And he looked at me and he was like, he just pointed at me. He's like, that's you, dude. I'm like, okay. And then so I brought my fiddle on the road and I was trying to teach myself. Do not do that. That didn't work. And then in January is when I started taking lessons of 23. So
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the hardest instruments.
it absolutely is the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
It's like the oral and theoretical shit you had on Fleek, but then it's like holding the bow and all that shit. Is that kind of the biggest hurdles?
Yeah, it fucking sucks, man. I mean, it sounds awesome. Like when my fiddle teacher plays, I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. I want to do that. But shout out to Megan Purdue. You're great. But I'm getting there.
Hey, last thing, you made a goal and committed to it. You did like, what was it, 200 days in a row or some shit? Tell me.
I did. Well, Nick always does Dry January, so I did Dry January. But also Hillary Hahn, who's a classical violinist, she does this thing where she practices every day for 100 days straight, and she posts like what she's practicing, and so she includes people to like also practice. So I did 100 days of Dry January, whatever that is, and then practicing every day, which is cool. And it was the fear of playing stadium shows, playing fiddle. That makes
That's
it
a big
lot,
motivator.
yeah.
Oh,
So
my God.
50,000 people listening.
yeah, I had lit a fire under my ass for sure.
I remember that first gig I played with Luke at his old college, App State. I was like highly, already plenty motivated before that. But that day, like being there, I just found some room in one of the little, in whatever the college facility was, and just locked the door and literally all day just ran the set.
Yeah.
That's motivating. It's like, I am not going to fuck this up.
Yeah. I remember Kurt telling me you were doing that too.
Oh,
Like
dude.
when it happened, he's like, Matt's just like going through his set. And Kurt was
still
like,
do,
that's
but-
sick. Like, because
Thanks,
he's
man.
a practice guy,
Yeah, yeah.
I know, but like if I'm playing bass, like I'm playing Beard Over Broke My Heart for the 10th time, that it's like bomb, 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 bomb. I don't need to do that all day long.
Fair.
But I'm glad you did, because you didn't fuck up. You did great.
I did good.
And that's why you put a book about.
Yeah. So
chapter 3, music. Don't suck at music. If you need help, this is the chapter to read about. Is that the vibe?
For sure. Yeah, we
definitely the one to read about to see what you need to do, the steps to take.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here's some very beneficial things. Here's some further reading, tonal harmony, muso shit. Like, hey, go learn some scales from someone, a teacher, etc. Because the books, it's a guide. It's very short, but it's like, hey, here's some things that dude, ChatGPT, YouTube, and if you're listening to this and you live in Nashville, just hire Kurt or hire somebody to show you this shit. But if you're 12 and 14, 15, 16. It's a nice concentrated dose of like, here's what we did that we think would help you and other people.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't think about this book being good for people who aspire to be professional musicians that are like still in high school or in middle school or whatever. So that's cool.
Yeah, part of it I feel like was my former self at and growing up in a rural town.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like there were a few musicians there and there was a few good musicians, but I didn't really come from a musical family or background. But I thought it was cool and I wanted to do it, and I had some buddies that did it. And man, I just definitely didn't know where to get started. And stuff like this book, even to this day, I just consume a lot. It helps me learn more about myself, etc. And so I was like, man, this would have been dope to send Marty McFly back in time, like take this to little Matt, you know. So yeah.
Cool. So this book's all for the little Matts and Seths and Kurt's out there.
And not Nick's because I don't know how to play anything.
Well, we appreciate you being here. You're our moderator today.
Yeah, which is great.
Kurt can teach you.
Yeah. We're not going to go there. I remember I took a guitar class my senior year of high school, and my band teacher was also, had it first period, and so I would just go there for homeroom because my homeroom teacher like absolutely despised me as a human.
Oh.
So
That's awful.
I was like a little bit of a bad kid back in the day, so it's fine. But I was like a good bad kid, like a fun bad kid. So I would just stay down there, and I remember my band teacher being like, "Listen, dude, you could keep playing guitar, and you'd probably be like okay to like play some songs, but like if you were gonna try to do something, you're way better at drums than you are at guitar. So if you were gonna try to do something, I would probably say drums, not guitar."
Did you?
No. Yeah. I was already a senior in high school, and it was like, he was like, "We could put you on drumline and like, you could like do it."
You could set up a kit back here somewhere when people aren't here, just bash the shit out of
Yeah.
it.
Everybody around here would love it.
There is some like doom metal band that plays on Tuesdays here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. There's like I don't know. She's like a 65-year-old lady that has like a band, and they have like a rehearsal
Hell
space
yeah.
that's in this building, and they rock out.
Wow.
Like it's awesome.
Loud.
Yeah. But like we knew that before we came in,
Yeah.
And it's kind of great. They're like, yeah, they just like, they don't even play that many gigs. They just get in there and rock out like once a week.
Oh, that's fun.
Super cool. What do you think the biggest benefits to you as a person are from being in a band and doing it properly? That's a hard question, huh?
I'm thinking.
Either of you guys.
Man, biggest benefit. I mean, for me, it's definitely taught me how to work hard at something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
how to stick with something because, I mean, it's easy when you first. I'm a little ADHD, and so I have a tendency to jump around. But you can't have that kind of mentality and get anywhere with music.
Yeah.
Like you have to work hard and you have to stick with stuff because, I mean, unlike Kurt, I have attempted many instruments, but I haven't mastered. I feel like you've gotten on a lot of different instruments. Like I've tried to play saxophone 1,000 times and put it down after a week.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I knew that, like, okay, if I want to work, like I've got to have some sort of something that's kind of my thing, which kind of became keyboard.
Yeah.
I still play a good bit of guitar. And there's only so many hours in the day too. So
Right.
in a way, you do have to kind of figure out what makes you an individual and what makes you special and what you can bring to the table. But yeah, for me, I think playing in a band, like, it can be really demanding. I mean, you never know. Like, there's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of random things thrown at you. You might be on a gig and somebody's like, the singer's like, "Hey, I want to do this song a half step down today."
Yeah.
And if you're just kind of learning stuff just enough to get by and you don't have the knowledge to like change the key on the fly or whatever, you're gonna run into some problems. So for me, it's just one of the things that has taught me is to be on my toes all the time and just make sure that you're working hard and you're staying focused. Because if like when you get a gig, especially a good gig, like sometimes the tendency is just to sit back and coast. It's like, okay, I got this now. But like I think the best musicians know, like, you've got to keep learning, you've got to keep growing, you've got to keep working. So if you don't, you're going to get complacent, and then you could be out of a job. So
Yeah, and if everybody's growing outside of you that's in the band, you got to grow with them, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you give me the gist of the question again?
Yeah, just like, what do you think you get the most out of by being a musician and like having a touring gig?
Yeah.
Is it just the dopamine rush from being on stage?
That's super fun.
Yeah.
I know for me, just in a real like simplified way, I just remember going like, man, music is cool. It makes me feel good. I was listening to rock, and it took me out of my normal whatever day or whatever I was going through as a kid, and I was like, this is great. This is fun. And I never really thought like, oh, I could do that. I just was like, wow, this gives me this feeling.
Yeah.
And then time went on. I met some of those friends I was telling you about in Tishomingo, and they would do music, and I was like, oh, you can just do music. Because I just didn't do a school band program.
Yeah.
And I just was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I could try that. And they're like, you don't want none of this, Matt. No. but they were like, well, yeah. My buddy Michael was like, I got a bass. And dude, I swear to God, I was like, hell yeah, what's that? Like, I had no idea. And he's like, well, it's like he played guitar. He's like, it's like this, but it's different. And then I remember him trying to like play a song in his mom's car, and the bass was not very present, and he was like, "Can you hear it?" And I'm like, Anyways,
It
so
was
I start,
Injustice for All.
so finally just sitting and plucking with that, and I was like, okay, cool, this is something, and it gave me something to do, and I didn't really take it super serious in high school, but then I went to that music program. It was another thing where I was like, that those same friends had gone, they were a year ahead of me, and they'd went there, and they're like, come on in, the water's fine, we got a room. And I was like, well, shit, man, I'm not really good at anything else, and I wasn't good at that, but I definitely wasn't good at anything else. I was like, cool, whatever, move up there, and then this instructor really just kind of, so I think it just gave me, like, something to do, but it also was something that I was like, oh, I can do that thing, and it makes me feel like I belong on the planet. It makes me feel good. And then I'd get with a good drummer, and we'd lock in, and I'm like, oh, that's a really good fucking feeling. I want that. And even to this day, I just keep it simple. I just love playing bass, man. Rock, Latin, whatever. And it's not that I'm great at all these genres, but I do like playing them. And as long as the drummer's good, dude, I'm in. Like, that's always kind of been my motto. Bomb. It's fun. So it really gave me, it made me feel like I belong here.
Yeah.
On the
great.
planet.
Yeah.
In a funny, simple way.
On that note of just giving you something to do too, that's one of the coolest things about playing music for me is that, like, you're never done. Like, it doesn't matter how good you get. Like, it's something to do for the rest of your life. Like, if you want to do it, there's no like end in sight. Like, okay, I've learned this. Like, well, then go learn something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely gives you focus.
Have you all watched that documentary Blue Zones?
Mm-mm.
It's about pockets of the world that have like people that live to be over 100.
I did actually, yes.
I have.
And one thing they talk about is a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that being a musician is like you can always go and practice.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Mm.
I mean, if Hillary Hahn has to practice for 100 days in a row, like to get ready for her shit, then I'm like, I definitely need to be practicing,
Yep.
And I feel great when I get better at something.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
cool question, Nick. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, of course. I know we talked a lot about gigs on the road. What about I know studio work is a different kind of thing. Do you guys do you talk about that in the book as well?
Yeah.
We do, and I would say for me currently, and really most of my career as a musician, it's predominantly been live.
Yeah.
Same.
With the dream of doing more studio to whatever varying levels, and and I don't mean to just turn this into praise Kurt Fest, but I watch you do awesome studio sessions, and I'm like hyped for my friend, and it's cool. I just love that, and I love those types of players, and they inspire me to become better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm learning parts from other bass players on albums. I'm like, that's fucking sick, man. Like, and I add it to my little list of abilities and stuff. So
We're just going to have to make Matt play bass on the Butt Rock album.
Done.
I mean, I love it.
Studio work.
Seth will sing it.
Yeah. But yeah, and then there's some bands where it's like they're one and the same. They're like a band.
Yeah.
It's like they are like Queen.
Yeah.
John Deacon, he played on this stuff, or and then there's some artists here in town that have their studio people and their live people, and then there's some where they're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a one size fits all, but it's interesting to look at. And the drummer and I, Jake, we do music clinics, and that's a question we get a lot. It's like, hey, what was it like playing on this? And it's like, well, we didn't. We're learning parts from these great studio guys, and they're like, wow. And so we'll delve into that and not demystify it, but just kind of talk about it. And it's just, it's cool. It's interesting. And, I've played on, some recordings myself, and then maybe met the live player, and then we like bullshit and talk. And it's just cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Isn't that weird? Like, I've played on records, and then the guys that are playing my parts live are like, hey, what pedal did you use on that? Or what fret is that on? I'm like, I don't remember.
No clue.
You're like, that's Charlie work.
Yeah, true.
I will say there are definitely differences, in being on the road versus studio, and that's something we talk about in the book is, I think nowadays, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think there are more guys that are able to do both. I think back when I first started, it was like you're either a road guy or you're a studio guy.
Yeah.
But I think, with the advent of new technologies and being able to do work from home or from the road, you can make it work. Like if you want to do both. I think it also depends on the kind of person you are, because some people don't want the road life. They don't want to be gone 250 days a year. They want to sleep in their own bed. They want to. So the studio might be more of a thing for them to really pursue.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that you can't do a little of both, or
Yeah.
kind
I think about some of my heroes like Lee Sklar. He does a fair bit of both, and he's like top of the food chain bass player guy. But I look at that and I go like, heck yeah, man, I'd like to have my own version of that or whatever.
yeah.
And I think a lot of musicians, at least the ones that I know, kind of really love both. And Kurt, you do, again, a fair amount of both. How do you feel, has that, in your perception, has it changed? Like what Seth is saying, have you noticed like, yeah, it seems like there's a lot more of people doing both now, or do you even notice a difference?
I think that, you know, with Luke's touring schedule, where we haven't even started tour yet, and it's April 2nd or 3rd or whatever, makes it a lot easier, because what happens is, I've noticed, is a producer will call me, hey, are you free in the next couple of days to track steel in this? I'll be like, I'm in New Zealand. Call so-and-so. And they're like, okay. Well, once they call you and then you say no so many times, is this kind of like, well, they want to know that they have their guys.
Yep.
And which is why producers use the same guys. Like, I know this guy can do it, and I know he's around, and it's safe, and I'm going to use this person.
And he's funny and cool. And
yeah. And so it's like, if you're not around, then you're not, you know,
quite
it's like,
literally.
yeah, what have you done for me lately? Or that, you know, people forget, or someone else comes and does a great job. So, and they're in town more.
Yeah.
So that's why there's that split, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, with Luke's schedule, it's like, how many shows we're playing this year? Like 26 or something? So we're gone 14 weekends, 15 weekends maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm here, you know, Sunday through Thursday or whatever. So I
Ripping
have
licks.
more time. Yeah.
Love it. Cool.
What about like demos? I know there are a lot of like tracks now in the industry, but like, do you guys get demo work as musicians as well?
I've got some of that as far as recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten some of that. And now living in Nashville full time, I think people are like slowly, I say people, my circle has been like, oh, he's here. And like Kurt said, I can call him. And then, you know, a fair amount of it's been like, hey, man, can you do this in a couple of days?
Yeah.
And so also with bass, it's, I think, a little bit easier to do like a remote. Like I usually keep a bass on me so I can do remote tracking. Maybe I don't have my A rig, but I have a road rig. So yeah, I'd say quite a fair amount of demo work over the course of the last couple of years.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Seth can talk to this more, but it's like, also demo work isn't what it used to be, of course, because everything's in the box now.
Yeah.
And instead of riding with 3 riders, you get 2 riders and a third guy gal who's also a rider, but they're also
Tracks
building
person.
a track.
Yeah.
So they're putting in key bass and everything.
Right.
And so,
And like you said, if it's just boom, boom, I mean, everyone sitting at this table, you know,
yeah.
Not me.
has got that. Yeah.
So it's, you got to find your niche, I guess, to get that work, which is kind of like, if someone's like, man, I really want to get this demo, because the idea of a demo is get a rough recording of the song so you can play it for someone else so they can cut it, or so that as part of pre-production or whatever.
Yep.
So you got to think, you know, it's like, if you're going to re-record it anyway, are they spending the extra money to get a real bass player, or if they can just do the keys, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if the producer can play some pads and build the track or whatever. And now I get called all the time to play on records, and there's already steel on it, and it's like some computer thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, will you just replace this? I was like, sounds pretty good, but yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yes,
say
I
it's
will.
crazy to me how good that stuff's getting.
Yeah.
Not the steel one, though.
Not it's you can't. I mean, it's never gonna be. the
True.
same,
No, but you're absolutely right.
it's
I was
kinda
listening
scary.
to y'all's pod with Aaron, and you were talking about some of the track work that you had done for then to play live.
Yeah.
And man, that's a cool, interesting thing. I did that, I think, with the Swan Brothers, one of my last gigs. I think Joe, the drummer that got me on the gig, that's a whole nother can of worms, a whole nother story. I had to step down from the gig, and he was like, well, hey, man, like, let's track the bass. So I think I tracked the bass for the show, and they used that bass track for the next show just because it was literal last-minute family emergency type stuff.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, you know, can you track the bass, and then we'll use it in a next week, something like that, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
I remember that. Yeah.
Well, that's, you know, our short take on the recording stuff.
Yeah,
But just to dive into this a little bit, Chapter 4, what's after music?
Money.
Oh, shit.
Moolah.
Dinero.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
All right, here we go, boys.
Yeah. I mean, we get into the weeds a little in that chapter. It's
Yeah.
definitely...
We start with like the basic overview
Yeah.
of like, hey, here's all the different ways, because we're keeping in mind the 12-year-old just as much as the 20-something-year-old or 30-something-year-old of like,
how
hey,
do you even make money doing this?
right, 40 or 50, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, here's as many spheres as we could think of in the hours that we were sitting there writing that section.
Yeah.
Here's all the ways you can do it. And then, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it evolves from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it kind of also depends on the situation. Not everybody is on a salary gig. Some people are on a, show-to-show rate or whatever. And so all of those things kind of factor in, how you're going to manage your money.
Negotiating.
I mean, if you know that it's show pay and the artist you play for, it's going to be off this amount of time, you need to put some money back. You need to like mitigate problems before they happen by having some money in the bank.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And
We do save, spend, investing.
Yep. We
You
talk
know.
about all that stuff, which I think is, I don't know. I think that a lot of musicians are so free spirited and just like,
Right.
oh man, I'm just out here doing my thing, and like that might be an area that's, I know for me for a long time that was kind of a weak point in terms of like I just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Like as long as I had enough money to go eat,
Yeah.
go to Longhorn, get me a steak, I'm
Right.
good.
Yeah.
Then you turn
But it's
30,
like-
you turn 35. You turn,
And you're like, okay, like I got to think about retirement. And I got to think about this because I just
my back's hurting.
right, exactly. So yeah,
My
we
elbow's weird.
yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. I know. I've had. I mean, it's like I can talk about money for so long, but my mom and my dad too, but were like, "Hey, you should start a retirement plan." I'm like, "But I don't have any money to put in there." And they're like, "Yeah, you should have started already." And then so
Yeah.
I started touring with Jana, and making fine money, and so then they're like, "Well, start a retirement thing." And my uncle's my financial planner. And so it was just a couple $100 a month that would come out and go into a retirement thing.
Yeah,
And I've been doing that since 2014 or whatever. And then so it's like,
Killer.
and it was just like, it's like, don't go to Losers a couple nights a month or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're gold.
Yeah.
And then, but like it comes out, I don't even know, it's like, I didn't even miss it really.
Yeah.
And then every time I got a raise, I would just call my uncle, "Hey, I got a raise." So up that up. And so now that's what I do.
Oh, that's killer.
that's the beautiful thing too is it doesn't take that much. You know what I mean? Like I'm a big Dave Ramsey guy, and like he talks about the fact that like it's not like, oh, okay, I have to put this much in or nothing in. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
You could put $50, a week or a month into your. If you started that at 21 years old, by the time you're 60, I'm not good at math, so I don't know what that
It'll
would
be.
be.
It'll be a big chunk of change.
But you'll have a chunk of change,
Yeah.
So it's like, don't just totally ignore those aspects.
I spent so much time going gigs, chops, this and that, which do that.
Right.
But then like time started going by and I'm like, oh yeah, man, it would have been great to have, kind of started maybe putting some back sooner. So, or save for tough times when, I blew a tire and, think of all the years I spent, paying $250 to rent out a closet or something from somebody,
Yeah.
to keep the overhead down. Because when you first start, it's not like, hey Garth, can I jump on with you? Or whatever. You don't just jump on a big gig. You pay your dues and meet enough people that hopefully they'll believe in you and call you. But yeah, money.
Yeah, I've definitely also had. Well, so let's talk about negotiating a little bit.
Yeah, tough one sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I've had just a little example. Submitted my parking receipts to a tour manager on a gig, and they would say, "Oh, like, we don't cover parking receipts." And I said, "Yeah, you do."
Did you really?
Yeah.
Love it.
And I love you, Andrew. And he's like, "Well, no, we don't." I go, "All right, well, I'm going up the chain here." And he's like, "Well, hold on. I'm the squeaky oil, and I got the grease for the rest of the band." And so I was like, and their management was like, "Oh yeah, we should have already been covering that."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it
it's
just
like,
took someone saying something.
Yeah.
yeah. And so it, now that I've said it, everyone else in the band does it. So it's, there's always that thing, because I know people that have stuck their neck out and it just been guillotined off.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
I
but-
suffer from going too far the other way sometimes. So Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What?
Just bass player mentality.
Oh,
you know?
true. Fair.
Yeah, I'm like, we're not getting paid. You're like, oh, okay.
It's
you
all
know?
good.
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
We'll
but
get it next
it's
month.
certain things are important, man. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like even like you go to work at a bar or something. It's like they're gonna have a place for you to park, or at least if you're working downtown, it's like you get a $10 parking instead of 30 or 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like I'm not paying to go on radio tour and have to pay an extra $50 to park my car. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Here's a funny kind of side quest here. So now that the three of us have gigs, when you go play a gig that's with a different artist, that maybe it's my buddies back in Tish and they want me to come play a bar gig. Isn't it funny to like look back and go like, when you're trying to go up, you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go ask. But when you're thinking backwards, you're like, so where the fuck we parking, man? Like, I need to be, or
Yes,
it's different.
100%.
It's different from the top looking down.
A little more confidence.
A
now.
little more confidence.
Yeah.
So even somebody like me that's a little more like, I don't know, I'm like, hey man, y'all gonna get us at least a deli tray or
Yeah.
we need.
You're like, I'm not asking for vegan food for Kurt, but like,
I've just recently, last couple of years, I've gone out and when Luke's not busy and toured with other acts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of
That's where we met. Sorry.
yeah, it was when I was playing with Flatland. I got my Flatland head on.
Good boys.
Yeah, so it's always interesting seeing how other camps take care of things like that.
Yes.
Money being one of them, but also it's like going back to a sprinter or Flatland was like on a bus or whatever. But
Yep.
it's always like pretty interesting. But after having that experience of being at a spot where you're taken care of, it's easier to negotiate, I think.
Yes. And then you can advocate, like you said, for your fellow
Yeah.
musicians. And it's not like you're like, you're like, maybe they just haven't thought about it or aren't aware of it or,
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Like I said with that parking pass thing, it's like it just was never brought up, so
Right.
it just never happened.
out
so,
of sight, out of mind.
yeah.
And we talk a little bit about, the chain of command thing too. What you were saying, you went to the, I guess, TM maybe, and then like, okay, well, I'm going to go to this next level. Like we talk a little bit about, who's going to advocate for you and how you can find those people, and sometimes you do have to go up the chain, a little bit.
Yep.
It's
I'm telling
tough.
Dad.
It's tough being a band guy because it's like everyone. I mean, there's 10 million people that would kill to have our jobs.
Yeah. It's fun.
And I would kill to get my job for sure.
maybe not murder, but close.
Yeah.
Well, true. You know what I mean. And so it's hard to sometimes find footing to advocate for yourself when it comes to money.
Yeah.
But it's important and it's hard to do. And
Very.
we've had trouble. It's like when we played this Super Bowl, or not the Super Bowl. I wish the Thanksgiving halftime show.
Yeah.
It's like chasing that money down, and it's like, all right, Dallas Cowboy people, where's our TV money? And it was like, wasn't coming. So I'm like, we had to go to the union and be like, hey, and they were like, we're gonna go knock on Jerry Jones's door if we have to, and it took like forever, but we eventually got paid.
It happened,
so
yeah.
it's like sometimes you just have to be that squeaky
Right.
wheel,
And maybe for them, they're a giant organization. Maybe it was an out of sight, out of mind thing for them. It's
For
like
sure.
there's just so many.
yeah, and
Love
our checks, it's like you never know, but it's important, and it's really tough to, unless you've gone and done a lot of different things, to know what your worth is as a
Yes.
dude playing in a band,
100%.
Because Janet would always make jokes like, well, they got all these young kids over there at Belmont or whatever. I'm like, all right, well,
Yeah, take one out for a weekend.
yeah. Which, of course, I'm sure. Did you go to Belmont?
I did go to
Yeah.
Belmont. Yeah.
I went to Belmont too, actually, for my master's that I almost finished. But yeah, I mean, experience and the hang and all these different things really help a lot, I think, too.
Big time, man. Big time.
Yeah, but that's the tough part. I'm interested to for this book to come out.
Yeah.
What's the next chapter?
Let's keep moving.
5, 6.
Mindset.
Mindset.
Yeah, we talk about
Oh,
the
5, sorry.
5, chapter 5, mindset. Yeah, which, we cover a wide range in there too. I mean, everything from, avoiding negativity,
Oh my
because,
God, preach it, bro.
and the
Yep.
truth is, I think we've all known those people that maybe they started out one way and then things start to end up kind of
Yeah.
taking
Jaded.
a turn. Jaded, yeah. And, you have to make a conscious decision that I'm going to stay positive. I'm not going to let these little things like, cause me to act out or be a certain way, because that creates a toxic environment, and then like it all comes down to, You know, you want to get the gig, you want to keep the gig, and if you're a negative person and you're, you know, complaining about stuff all the time, you know, there's a time and a place. I mean, like we're talking about with advocating for yourself. Like if you're in a bad situation, there's a time and a place and a way to address those problems. But if you're just like, you know, bitching and complaining to your bandmates and this and that, like it can end up becoming a thing where it's like either people don't want to be around you or you're creating issues where
starts affecting the culture of whatever organization you're in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can eat it alive, you know. And, you know, I feel like I hope we did a good balance of like, hey, here's some, like, be positive and smile and all this stuff that's like, okay.
Some of it sounds cheesy, but it's real.
Right, yeah. But then also acknowledging that it is tough. So I feel like with our two personalities, I think both of us would pull the other one back to center. I can lean a little negative and says like, well, da-da-da. And I'm like, well, here's a nice happy medium of realistic, optimistic, but not overly like, everything will be fine if you just show up and smile.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
It's like we wanted to find a nice middle ground. I think we did, you know, stay positive. It's like, hey, man, I feel like we probably overstated it. We've been there and we know what it's like to feel negative or have a bad day. And it doesn't mean you have to like totally pretend, still be yourself. But man, y'all know, like when you work with people, it's like we're all kind of agreeing to this, like, hey, okay, I'll hold my side, you know, and if you drop your side, the whole freaking thing will topple over.
You know, and some stuff just doesn't need to be said. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's, my mom's always said, when in doubt, leave it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you got those people, hopefully in your life, family or close friends maybe that aren't related to your job, that if you need to vent or you need to, you know, get stuff off your chest and kind of like bounce it off another person, like, hey, does this seem weird to you or whatever might be going on the road, but or in the studio or whatever your gig may be. But like I said, you know, you start stirring the pot, you know, and it can backfire on you too.
Absolutely.
Not just, you know, because then, you know, it's like a game of telephone. You know, people start talking and well, he was saying this and like he was complaining about that.
People like to talk.
People like to talk, and then it's like, oh, well, I just wish I hadn't even said anything. It was an offhanded remark, you know. I had a bad day. It's like, and we're all gonna have bad days, and you know, and sometimes, you know, you do confide in your bandmates and stuff. But I just think it's important to kind of keep that stuff in check.
We've got some good guys on the team, man. And it's like
the best.
If I feel like man, this seems fucking really weird, I'll be like, Kurt, is this weird? And he'll be like, yeah. I'm like, cool, thanks. You know, it's like no ego, just like, hey, helping friends out. Hey, is my thinking right or am I off?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had jobs where it's like, you know, you feel a certain way, but then through you feeling that way, you are negatively affecting other people, right? So
it makes sense in your head.
Yeah, but I've always tried to be mindful to be a light, even if there's things going on, you know?
Yeah.
Like, all right, yeah, let's push forward. Like, because you're not going to get anything usually by complaining about stuff unless you have ways to solve the problem.
Exactly.
If you're complaining to complain and there's no way to solve the problem, all you're doing is bringing that thing down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have a couple people in your life, like you talked about, like a significant other or best friend or a mom or whoever, you know, that you can have those moments with.
Yes.
Right?
It's important to have those people and be self-reflective.
Yes.
That's another common recurring is another recurring theme in the book. It's like, man, if you're reading this and you feel like this comes easy to you, okay, maybe skip it or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're going to find something in here that you're like, I wonder. And if nothing else, when you read this book, just at least start with that approach of like, this might be me. And if it's not cool, mark it off.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think about people, and part of some of the parts of this book that were inspired by a specific person. It's like, man, I hope that they do, or those archetypal, like whoever that is type person picks it up, reads it. And if they start with that, like, if this is me, I need to fix it. That's my real hope, our real hope with the book, like the heart. It's like, I hope they read it and go, maybe this is me, and maybe I need to change that.
Yeah.
So anyways, just I really hope people do that.
That's great.
I love it. Nick, you are a light, bro. You're a light in my
thanks.
life,
Yeah, man.
I love all y'all.
Yeah.
All three of you guys.
We love you
There's
too,
some
Kurt.
good boys out here.
That served me well throughout everything that I've ever done, right?
Yeah.
And you can't say it's always happens, and there's things that in your life that you can't control, family stuff or stuff that's happening at home, you know, sometimes that.
Yep.
But
and what an interesting balance of like job, and then you make friends on your job, and you're like,
how do these all work? Yeah.
are we really friends?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. But if you think back to all of the stuff you guys get to do music for a living full freaking time.
Yeah.
Right? That is, like you guys talked about, that is a lot of people's dreams.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
And
Definitely
that's the
mine.
people that are going to be reading this book. That's either their current state or their dreams too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
You know, so I think it's a super important part.
We were at rehearsal and Kurt was playing pedal steel and we were playing and then like we kind of stopped a minute and I don't know, getting a drink of water and Kurt just started laughing. I think pretty loud. Correct me if any of this is wrong. And I kind of looked over and I'm like, oh man, I want to know what's funny or whatever. And he goes, anybody else think it's just like really funny that I just like, this is what I do? Like I play this? And I was like, yeah, man.
It's
right
a weird
on.
instrument, man.
Yeah. I get paid to do
That's
that.
our job. Yeah. It's like,
Especially like I got drums. That makes sense. You know, like
gotta do those.
bass for sure.
Yeah.
Keys, singing. I'm like steel guitar. What the fuck is this thing? You know, it's like. It's,
Make folks feel what you feel inside.
Yeah.
no doubt. All right, well, keep us moving along here. I think we're
Yeah.
getting towards the end of the book here, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we're
So
almost there.
our
Six is
mindset's
myths.
good. We are not negative in here.
No.
We're
Yeah.
keeping it. We're
No
all
negativity.
light.
Everything's
Positivity.
great.
Vibes 11.
Myths. That's a fun one. I think the first one's like myth. You're going to wind up penniless and addicted.
Yep.
And then, then we get into the truth and kind of dispel. And there's like 20 or 30 or 40 of those.
Yeah, I'm going to be rich and famous. You know what I
Right.
mean? And like,
It's like we're not saying you're not going to be, but, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
If you're a bass player, unless you're Pinot, man, good luck.
yeah,
I'd love to read that chapter. I don't want to spoil everything.
No.
I already know what myths I would put in mind for sure.
Go for it. Which one?
Well, if you're a single guy
Yeah.
and you're on the road, myth is that like we're all partying like we're in Motley Crue or something.
Yeah.
You
I
know
think
what I
we-
mean?
that we
Talk
tip
about
our hats to that.
Motley
Yeah.
Crue,
Yeah, so it's not like that.
No.
So
If people could see some of the backstage hangs that end
I know
up
you're
happening,
in your bunk playing Final Fantasy VII for sure.
I love Final Fantasy
I have a
VII.
couple red solo cups suction to my nipple.
Yeah.
Tits. Kurt's playing
Yeah,
chess.
eating a piece of pepperoni.
But it's I mean it's like we're all like we said when you get on the bus you're clocked in and
Yes.
speaking to the Luke thing, it's like Luke's married, Luke has kids. Like most of the guys in our band have girls and have kids, and it's like it's
Yeah.
a family thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'd rather do music than do any other stupid
Right.
shit anyway. So
That's the fun shit, man, is playing, It
Yeah.
really is.
and also another myth. They're like, wow, Luke's really big. You must be super rich. And I'm like, well, it's not. I'm not getting a portion of what he's.
Right, we're not, like, riding the tunes.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
The
So-
intellectual property is, more.
Yeah.
I
Luke's-
love that. As
Luke's
a,
take
as
care
a
of you guys,
chapter.
of course.
Oh,
but
my goodness.
Fuck
yeah.
He's a fucking king, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally love the guy.
Yeah. But I'm very intrigued by the myths chapter, so I'm excited. to
Yeah,
read
there's
that.
some good ones, man. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of some of the other ones that might be noteworthy or fun, or what's a funny one?
Man, I'm trying to think.
Those first two are pretty funny.
Yeah.
I'm going to wind up penniless and addicted. And then, like, somewhere in there, we're like, just because your great Aunt Karen can't conceptualize what making a living doing music is, doesn't mean, there's that fucking Thanksgiving meme that's like, what are you doing in there, my little musician? Still doing your little music thing? I'm butchering it, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
sure.
isn't a funny one, but one that comes to mind that I really like is talent always beats hard work. Like in other words, if you're like the most talented guy in the room, you can kind of just do whatever you want. And like,
Absolutely
oh, that
not.
guy's a freaking beast on his instrument. Like
Yeah.
honestly, the lesser player that's a good hang, in my experience, is going to get the gig. 'Cause
100%.
We're
of the
playing
time.
pop music. You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
you don't
Like-
have to be Tommy Emmanuel on the guitar to get a gig. Now
Nice.
that's awesome if you are, and
Yeah.
that's what we all aspire to, to be great. But I just think your character is definitely as, if not more important.
And how you make other
Your
people
ability.
feel.
Yeah.
If you are like literally 3 times better musically than everyone else, they know that you know that they know that you know. It's like you don't
Yeah.
have to really, and if you do, and if you don't make people feel good, it's like
I know so many players that are way better than me.
So,
That
dude.
maybe
Me too.
struggle. Yeah.
laughable.
Maybe struggle,
Same.
with getting a job, and that's not a slight to them, but it's something I learned a long time ago. Was it's not all about how good you are as much as how you treat people.
Well, I will speak about Seth now because I love you.
I love you too.
Seth came and subbed for Luke, and you fucking crushed it, dude. And he learned the shit out of the music, literally, and played everything so great and perfectly. And hanging out was the best, dude.
We had fun.
So fun.
Yeah, it was the best. So like, I mean, I would recommend you for any gig in the world.
Thanks, man. That means a
So
lot.
Keep the gig then.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Seriously. So like, these guys are, and Matt, you're the same way. You stepped in and crushed it, and like even like when you went and played Flatland, it's like you had how many days to learn a 90-minute set?
Couple days, yeah.
And you went and crushed it, and all those guys love you now.
Yeah.
And because you're just a great person, and you did the homework, and so it's like you went and made them feel comfortable, and then you had a great time doing it.
Yeah.
And like, it's really that simple.
Conceptually,
you know?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, yep, exactly.
So
Thanks,
you
man.
guys are both studs.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. And you, I'm glad you guys are doing this book thing. It's
Thanks,
cool.
man. Musings is the last chapter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's, we go for it, man.
We go down the rabbit hole.
We go down the rabbit hole.
What is-
literally,
what-
figuratively.
Like what?
Man, one of my favorites. We just talk about stuff that maybe people don't necessarily always, talk about. And one of
FOMO.
yeah, we
Sorry,
talk.
you were gonna
Yeah,
say something.
FOMO's a good one. I mean, we talk about
Interrupting each other?
how to handle,
I'm good at that. Sorry.
how to handle getting angry on the road. Like, take a deep breath, walk away.
Yeah.
Don't get into it with your guys, because like, you know what I mean. Like you lose your temper
Sure.
one time and go overboard, and then. We talk about just I think I would call it the most random chapter.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good way to
The
put it. It's the
catch-all.
longest.
It's the longest.
It's
We talk
the longest,
about
bro.
to move or not to move is one of our headings, and it's like
Yeah.
I've heard this question a lot. Do I have to live in Nashville or New York or LA to play to have a gig?
Yep.
And that's one of the ones we talked about a lot.
And it's an
a lot.
interesting
Yeah.
question. It's,
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of the times, yes, always, maybe not. I mean, if you've got a successful YouTube channel and you're just making all this money, that's and that's a rare thing, but that does happen, And then for me, I was living in Oklahoma for a lot of years, and I've only really lived in Nashville full-time 2 years. I've been living here part-time for 8 or 9, and I was commuting back and forth. And I was married at the time, and my partner didn't necessarily want to move, so I was like, hey, well, I'll just stay here and commute. Is that cool? And then, when we got divorced, I was like, well, I think it's time to move. And then literally that week is when I got the call for the Loot gig, so I was already going to move. So, I was here, but technically I didn't live here and get that gig, which is not always the case. I think that's a lot of times not. Anyways, just to say that is a kind of a complex question. It's like, do I have to move there? It's like, well...
I think it works for some people, and
There
it
you go.
doesn't for some people. I know in y'all's band and in my band, there's some guys that live out of state, but they just come into town to do their gigs, and it works. For other people, it might be such a chore to drive that far, and maybe they don't want to. So I think it's we talk about a lot of factors like, am I single? Do I have responsibilities back here, in Alabama or wherever you might be, that would make it really difficult for me to,
Yeah.
just have a job in another state. But
And I feel like a common theme underlying the whole book, it's like, hey, no matter what you want to do, align yourself with like, hey, I'm a human first, and I have a life, and I have value, da-da-da-da. I like to play music. How do I do that better?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to do this. Okay, well, what is this? Well, this is headline a show at Madison Square Garden. Okay, well, here are some steps that would be good to take and to do. You don't have to do it exactly like this, but this will most likely work. And then someone goes, well, man, I've never really played guitar, but I want to play in a band. It's like, well, cool. Take some of these principles and apply them too. So it's like, I feel like we tried to really just go, hey, man,
it's not one size fits all.
It's not one size fits all, and you don't have to do this to be fulfilled. Like, dude, just go do it. Like, if you go in and kill it and learn the tunes and show up and play the gig, well, fuck, who cares? Like, it feels good to like nail a set, whether it's at a bar for 5 people or 50,000, man. So anyways, I feel and hope that this book really impacts people's hearts. Like, hey, man, wherever you are and whatever it is you want to do, just allow it to help make you better. And if that's, playing all these big shows, cool. But if it's just playing with your local dudes in your neighborhood, you're a doctor and you just want to, these principles still apply, man. You still, hey, see you at 7, be there at 7 if you can, man.
It's good life advice too.
Yeah.
So I think that people that would enjoy this book are musicians,
Yes.
people who listen to music,
Mm-hmm.
people who haven't listened to music.
yeah. Animals love this book,
Yeah.
dude.
If you have a pet, then you should buy them this book. Dogs love to chew it.
Buy the book, buy this shirt, man. I'm not even. I like this shirt. It's very comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's got a raccoon on it, which is great.
Sweet little baby trash baby.
And I'm wearing it, so it's gonna be like in my laundry, and then I do that laundry, and it'll be on top of the next pile. So I'm gonna be wearing it regularly, man. Love you guys.
Dude, appreciate you.
Well,
appreciate
we love
y'all.
you too.
Well, where can they buy the book? And when's the thing?
Yeah. What do you think, Seth?
Well, so we're in the final stages of little details, which
Yeah.
we didn't realize how many details go into releasing a book.
So many
It's
details.
So many details.
We get it. You wrote a book. Okay. That's fine.
You got to edit. You got to format. You got to figure out the cover. You know, you got to get the back cover. You've got to
Edit the editor's revised edition.
Yeah.
This is the third revision.
And we've also just recorded an audiobook version that'll be coming out soon too.
'Cause musicians aren't the best at reading sometimes.
Yeah, so they can just turn it on in their car or whatever. But we're shooting for the next 2 to 3 weeks
Yep.
to
Nice.
have a copy
Give us
available
a
on Amazon.
general date. It's like very,
today?
very general.
What is today?
It'll be out by May 1st. Can I
Yeah.
get
There
on
you
a
go.
limb- on a
Right on,
limb and
yeah.
say that?
Hiredmusician.com.
Nice.
Check that out, man. I'm going to do we're kind of DIY in some of this here, and I've done a Shopify store, so I'll probably get that rolling again.
Yeah.
And then you just hop out on there and say, hey, I want this. We're going to do some signed paperback copies,
Heck yeah.
some special stuff.
Put a
Maybe-
Pokemon card in one
Maybe
of them.
some
Yeah.
Pokemon cards, some
The
rare.
golden ticket to the Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Chocolate Factory is just you get to hang out with us and do a podcast.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'm proud to know you boys.
Yeah,
And
me
thank you
too.
guys
Y'all
for
too.
coming and chatting about
Thank you,
hog
guys.
testicles and music and all kinds of stuff.
I love what y'all are doing, man.
Yeah.
Big
Thanks,
fans,
brother.
really. No bullshit.
Yeah.
Shout out I know you guys have an Instagram page for the book, so
Oh, yeah. At Hired Musician, I think.
Hired musician.
We got lucky, man. We found a lot of, the website's available, Instagram's available, Facebook's available, Hired Musician. So I think if you just
So we
look
didn't have
that
to
up.
say hired musician 36124.
Yeah.
and how about your personal pages, just in case people want to be your friend on the internet?
I'm Matthew Maxwell. Matthew is spelled with just one T.
Only one.
The other one fell off somewhere.
And I'm
Stupid joke.
just Seth Costner with one T as well.
With the blue check.
With a blue check that I'm trying to get removed.
Yeah. Oh, it's
The
so
blue
great.
zone.
All right, boys. Well, I'm Kurt Ozon,
And I'm Nikki T.
and we'll see you all in the front,
Front row.
Thanks, you guys.
Literally, we'll see you guys in the front row.
Yeah, quite.